Okay, good evening, everyone. Calling to order the Eight-Town Regional School District Planning Board at 5:30 p.m. The meeting is being recorded. I'm going to call for roll call attendance. Starting with Alford, Charlie. Charlie, I thought I saw you.
He's here somewhere.
He was here.
He was here.
He greeted us all.
Okay,
So,
we'll come back to him. Carl?
Yes, here, present.
Okay, I'm here. George from Egremont, George.
Present.
Tom.
Present.
Jim. Great Barrington, Deb.
Yes.
Peter Taylor. Steve Bannon.
Yes.
Monterey, John.
Yes.
Don.
Yes, present.
Kim.
Yes.
Numero, Tara.
here.
Susan.
Here.
Nancy. Not here. Sheffield, Nadine.
I'm here.
Colin.
Here.
Bonnie? No. I see Kim is on. All right. Stockbridge, Patrick. Patrick, you're here, right?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
Yes,
for Patrick.
sorry.
Okay, Michael's here
Here.
and Bill is here.
Here.
Great. And West Stockbridge, Maria's not going to be able to make it. Sarah?
Here.
And I believe Andy is not going to be able to make it, right? Oh, and Peter Taylor's joined us.
Yes, I have. Sorry, I'm late.
Oh, that's okay. And did I miss anyone? All right, well, welcome all. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. They were circulated this morning. May I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second,
I second and move to accept by unanimous consent.
okay. Well, usually, Carl, we get all the typos corrected at this point. So does anyone have any corrections before we approve by unanimous consent? No? Okay. So hearing no objections, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. All right, next thing on the agenda is something that Patrick asked we put on the agenda for this meeting today, and that was the possibility of allowing public comments during the meeting as opposed to requiring everyone to wait until the end of the meeting to provide their public comments. So Patrick, why don't you speak to that request, and then I'll open the floor.
I believe we should give the chair discretion in all of our meetings to allow the chair of that committee or subcommittee to allow the public to contribute before taking votes on agenda items during meetings. We're making decisions that could impact how our district runs for decades, and I believe public comment can help inform our discussions. So there it is.
Okay, any discussion on that? Tara?
Listen,
Yeah,
I have no issue with that, Patrick, except that I think you need to put a time limit on it, because if you don't, then somebody could talk 5 minutes or 10 minutes on something, maybe a 2-minute time frame. You know, you've got 2 minutes to do your, whatever you want to say, and please say it. And
Do you think the chair could set those limits as part of the discussion? I'm ambivalent, but I feel like the chairs are really able to run the meetings, and they've done an excellent job at it.
Tara? Is you're okay?
I,
Okay,
I'm okay.
okay. Carl, Colin, then Kim.
I agree with that time limitation. Not requirement, but request. I think that that without some sort of relatively short time limit, public comment during the course of the meeting could make these meetings considerably longer, and I think that would be unfortunate.
Okay, Colin?
I think I share the same concern as Carl. I'm open to public comment. I really am. But I worry that too many people asking too many questions from the public side of things could bog down the meeting. And even if there's a time limit, if there's numerous people that want to ask a question or speak, how are we going to keep the meeting on track? I'm just asking an open-ended question. I don't have an answer for it.
Okay, Kim?
I agree about the time limit, but also the public comment, because we did an outreach in our district last night and absolutely nobody has any idea or information what's going on. They really have so many questions. So at least if they're sitting in, they can ask the questions in real time and actually get the information that they need in order to vote for this. Because everybody we talked to last night, and there were several participants, said they were totally in the dark about almost everything.
Okay, let's not debate that.
I'm not a debate. It's not a debate.
Yeah,
I'm just
let's
relaying facts last night. So if they have public comment and question, then they're not getting their answers third hand, fourth hand, or fifth hand. They can
Yeah.
actually ask.
Well, all of our meetings are obviously open, and
I agree.
There's a ton of information out there and lots of community events that we've sponsored. So I don't want to get into a debate as to whether or not the information is out there. The question is whether we want to take public comment. We want to give discretion to either take or not take public comment during the course of the meeting. That's the question that Patrick put forward.
My point is that they could ask in real time in case, so they could understand the information.
Yeah, and I think that's what Patrick was proposing.
Yes.
So Don and then Bill. Oh, I'm sorry, Bonnie was next. Bonnie, Don, and then Bill.
Thank you. I would suggest two things. One, that I am in favor of it, but I would like it, we could do a 3-minute with a total of no more than, let's say, 15 or 20 minutes. It helps the person who is chairing the committee to be able to say, you have a half a minute left. And I think it helps people who want to speak to control what their statements. And in terms of total time limit, given how packed so many of our agendas are, I would suggest that we limit the total time, because for most of our meetings, we're putting aside an hour and a half to 2 hours. If you're now asking it to stretch, for 3 hours, if there is not a limit. So again, my suggestion is 3 minutes per person, and to put a time frame for public comment.
Okay, Bill, Don, and then Deb.
I agree with Patrick's proposal and with the time limit idea. I also think that holding public comments to the very end of the meeting is a little cruel to the extent that there are people from the public who tune into the meeting. I'm looking at the faces today. Are there any public members tuning in at this point?
Yes, so our public members, Bill, would be in the attendee group.
Okay, so
And
are there
right
some?
now we've got 7
Oh, okay, good.
who are in the attendee group.
Good.
And one hand that's up, which unless I'm given discretion to recognize, I'm not going to recognize. So that's, I think,
Yeah.
what Patrick is suggesting is that the chair has discretion to recognize, Lucinda's hand is up. She's a select board member in Egremont. If I had that discretion, I would probably recognize her.
Yeah. I guess the other point I was going to make was, doesn't the website have a provision for questions to be sent in and don't they get answered? I don't know who
Yes.
answers them. I guess they get referred to the appropriate committee.
Yeah, Jake answers every single question that's posted. So
Yeah.
if people have questions and they want answers, the information is certainly there, and they can get a one-on-one response if they post a question on the website.
And Jake, do you get flooded with questions every day?
No, it's not. It's not horribly bad. I did get a question today, but yeah, it's been an okay stream, probably 6 to 10 a week. Yeah, not horrible.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I can't, whoops.
Bless you, whoever that was.
I can't remember if I did Don or Deb or Don, but Don, why don't you go next and then Deb?
Okay, thank you. I don't believe in rules that are inconsistent with good sense and with our getting our job done. Of course, there are people out there who have questions, but we're not here to be answering everybody's individual questions. We're here as representative body to use our judgment to decide these issues, and we're already at 26 people. To expand that in a manner that would be uncontrollable, you could have 50 calls, 100 calls. It could happen. So I don't understand adopting a rule that is inconsistent with our getting our job done. I would oppose it.
Okay, thanks. Deb?
I would support it. There are a couple of clarifications that I would want to make. There's a difference between asking a clarifying question about a topic that we're discussing and asking a general question at a meeting that has nothing to do with the topic at hand. So I think that it's fine to accept comment on the thing that we're talking about.
Hi.
When we're done deliberating, when the board is done speaking, if there are people in the audience who have a question or a brief comment that is pertinent to the topic at hand, I think that's fine. I think it should be time limited, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I think it's 3 minutes that select boards usually restrict comment to. And to ask people respectfully to not repeat something that's already been said, so that I think that it's fine for us to answer clarifying questions. I think it's fine for us to accept comment on the topic that we're trying to make a decision about or learn more about, and that it should be time limited and focused and people asked to be respectful. So I think those are the caveats that I would put there, which are general common sense caveats as far as I'm concerned. But I know that they need to be stated at every meeting that you have that policy so that people are clear. And when you say, I hear what you're saying, it's not pertinent to the subject, you've got a framework that you're setting boundaries within. So that would be my point of clarification. I think it is helpful when people can comment or ask questions at the moment and not 45 minutes later. So thank you.
Okay, Patrick?
Yeah, my focus is not primarily on answering questions, and I think that is actually an area where the chair should use a lot of discretion, because that is not the job. I completely agree with Don. That is not the job of this panel in real time to be answering questions while we're in the middle of a discussion. My concern is that we need to make sure, as we make decisions that literally will govern a body for an indefinite period of time into the future, that the best ideas are able to be presented. And I would just suggest that of the thousands, well over 10,000 people in this district, that these 26 people may not have all the answers all the time, and we should allow folks to comment. The example you gave of Lucinda in the attendee list, she's a select woman in a local town, and clearly has a perspective that I want to hear. And I'm assuming that she doesn't need to take 26 people's time to ask the question, and that she's sophisticated enough to understand she can reach out to you or Jake. That's what I'm talking about, not like Q&A.
Thanks, Patrick. Okay, Don and then George. Don? Okay, George, why don't you go?
Okay, just very briefly. I have had comments from several people that the only time we've had for public comment is at the end of the meetings. And if we had 5 minutes or more public comment, it was unusual over 3 years. So there is that feeling out there. I must say that if Kimberly is referring to the same district-wide, Southern district-wide meeting of last night, I found people very well informed. If you're going to do it, I think you should put a time limit on it, but it could certainly get out of control and out of hand. There will be people that don't necessarily know the kind of vague Robert's rules that you govern us by. Perhaps if we were to just block out a time at the end, like 20 minutes for comments, that might satisfy something.
Okay. I don't think there's ever been a meeting, George, where I have not taken every public comment at the end of the meeting. And so if the public comment period is less than 10 minutes, it's because we don't have any public comments. I've never cut anyone off at the end of the meeting. Peter?
Yeah, thank you for letting me speak briefly on this. I'm actually, quite frankly, mixed on this. I think I would predict all of us are supportive of the importance of public input. In fact, we have invested a ton of resources and time into reaching out in a number of different ways to get public input and to be receptive to public comment. I think it's a core ethic that we're approaching our work. I also hear Don's comment about what is the purpose of these meetings around the importance of deliberation among us as a representative body and what is going to be most efficient. And so how do we balance this? And one idea I have is we include public comment in the middle of the meeting if that topic has an action item. If we are about to vote on something, that we make sure that we pause and we hear public comment as part of that deliberation before we are asked to vote on anything. That would allow us, to have that input at a consequential time that might factor into our opinions as board members.
John Silver.
Yes, thank you. This is a complicated topic, and I think we have to understand that we are a representative board of 24 people, and we have been chosen to deliberate and to make decisions. I think there's a tremendous amount of information out there available to people. I think that the public is always free to ask questions and to come to the meetings and to make public comments at the end. And I want to deliberate with my board. And I would feel uncomfortable with members of the public acting essentially in a deliberative manner, even on a vote that's coming up. And so I'm not in favor of this. I also think that we're giving Lucy an awfully hard job. People have already mentioned, well, there's a select board member, in the other room, they need to speak. Well, why would a select board member be any more important than any other member of the public? Why is a select board member more important than a parent or a teacher or a taxpayer? And I'm not sure that you know, it's going to be a fun job for Lucy to decide who gets to speak and who doesn't and when. And I think that discretion is going to be, it's going to be a problem. So I really think the public has a lot of opportunity here. The whole thing has been set up so that we do the hard work and that they get involved as much as they want. And boy, I'm telling you, you can get really involved. People can read for hours. They can attend all of these meetings, all the subcommittee meetings. They can comment at the end. They see the agenda ahead of time. If they see that there's something up for a vote, they can send in comments to Jake beforehand. But this is a board of 24 people and 2 superintendents, and I would really like to keep it that way.
Okay, we'll take Don and then I hope.
I have a
we'll either-
motion.
Okay.
We have an awful lot on the schedule today. There have
Yep.
been many arguments that are worthy of consideration made tonight. I move that we table this until next meeting.
I'll second.
Okay. Hoping there's no discussion on that and we can just take a vote on tabling. So hearing no objection, all those in favor of tabling. Charlie,
Yes.
Carl? Carl?
Oh, I was muted. Yes.
Okay, George,
Yes,
Tom,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Don,
Yes,
Kim,
Sure, yes.
Tara?
I,
Betty?
Yes.
Yeah, Susan,
Yes.
Bonnie,
Yes,
Nadine? Nadine,
Yes.
Colin,
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Kim? Did I already call you?
I
Kim?
revoted, but. if
Okay,
you want me to
yeah.
vote for it.
No, that's okay, Colin. Okay, so the motion is tabled. All right, continued discussion of the Eight-Town Regional School District Agreement. The topic that we had discussed at the last meeting was the naming of the district. The page 1 of the agreement we have as a working name Southern Berkshire Hills Regional School District. And so the question before us tonight is, do we adopt that as the name of the school district? Do we adopt some other name as the name of the school district, or do we delegate to the transition committee the job of selecting the final name of the school district and just use this as the working name? We did check in with Desi on this to make sure it would be permissible to delegate that job to the transition committee, and we were told that it would be permissible. So that is an option. We've had a lot of discussion about this already. And so maybe it's time for someone to make a motion and we can move to a vote relatively quickly. Oh, I don't want to skip over something very important, which was that delegated to community outreach was the job of soliciting some community feedback on the name Southern Berkshire Hills Regional School District, and we did that. We did a Survey Monkey, which we had up for, I don't know, a week and a half, Jake, 2 weeks. Do you want to show the results of that survey?
Mhm.
Okay.
I can go in a slideshow mode if you'd like me to, but this is just my screen without going to slideshow. And we had 204 respondents. Thanks to Mary Nash for putting the survey together. Really simple survey, 3 questions. How satisfied are you with the combined name Southern Berkshire Hills Regional School District? on a 5-point Likert scale from completely satisfied to not satisfied at all. You can see Mary disaggregated the results by all respondents and then respondents that identified either as belonging to Southern Berkshire or Berkshire Hills. And then 21 respondents were who did not identify as living in one of the 8 towns. You can see that I've just sort of put in red the moderately to completely satisfied group, and in effect, basically, it's around 75 to 80% of the respondents, the 204, suggested that they would be either moderately or completely satisfied with the name Southern Berkshire Hills Regional School District. And the next slide just shows you where the respondents were from. So we had most participation from Great Barrington and West Stockbridge. And you can see where the other 8 towns line up, and then outside of the 8 towns, either in Berkshire County or outside of Berkshire County. And then we did ask, so that was the second question, where do you live? We asked. And the third question we asked was, do you have alternative names that you'd like us to consider? And this was a long list of alternative names that were shared. These were presented to community outreach last Friday. So you can see that, there were some repeat names: Southern Berkshire Regional School District, which is the current name of one of our school districts. We had 8 folks who said that. And then there were a few other names where people signaled that more than one person suggested that name. It seemed like there was a pattern with wanting South and wanting Berkshire in the name in some configuration. And then there were some names, obviously, that fell well outside of that, like it, borrowing upon other, physical or geographic features like Everett or Housatonic into the name. So that's it. I can go back, or these are just the 3 slides that Mary sent along as a very, very brief summary of the survey.
Yeah. Okay. Nadine, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the name Southern Berkshire Hills Regional School District as the name of the new district.
Second.
Okay. Discussion. Oh, this is a record. Okay. No discussion. We're going to vote. All those in favor of adopting Southern Berkshire Hills Regional School District as the name of the 8-town district.
I have a
Charles?
question.
Yeah.
Is it based on the paragraph that's listed in the new regional agreement that says it will be through the transition?
No.
Or is Nadine, you're saying permanently?
Correct.
Okay.
That was my motion.
Okay. Everyone clear on the motion? Okay. All in favor of Nadine's motion? Charlie?
Yes.
Carl?
Yes.
George?
Present.
You in favor? I'm sorry, are you in, is that a vote in favor?
No, I voted present.
Oh, so you're abstaining from the vote?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Tom Burkle?
Present, same thing.
Deb Phillips? Deb?
Yes.
Peter Taylor?
Yes.
Steve Bannon?
Yes.
John Silbert?
Yes.
Don Coburn?
I actually like Peter Taylor's suggestion, but I'm voting yes.
Kim?
Abstain.
Tara?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Present.
Yeah, I'm just going to step in. I'm here. I'm actually here, Lucy.
Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy. I didn't know
Yeah.
you had arrived. Okay, Nancy.
Yeah, I've been here for quite a while. I'm going to go with yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Nadine,
Yes.
Colin,
Present.
Patrick,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Is there anyone I missed? Oh, Sarah, did I get you?
Yes.
Okay. Did I miss anyone? Okay, so great, we got that decided. Thank you. All right, school committee vacancies. So this should be an easy one. This is Article 2C. If you have your draft agreement with you. And there are two decision points here. I think, Jake, you've got a slide with the two decision points. The first is who fills the vacancy? If there is a vacancy, is it going to be just select board? Now that's the decision point too.
This is it, school committee vacancies.
Yeah, but there's a decision, okay, well, they're two,
Yeah, I was gonna put in red.
you're missing an issue there. There are two issues that need to be decided. Number one, who fills the vacancy? Is it just the select board? Or is it the select board plus the resident school committee members in that respective town? And the reason I say this is a relatively easy one is because we decided this question already when we were talking about appointment of the appointed transition committee, and we had that discussion about whether that appointment should be made by just select board members, a majority of the select board, or a majority of the select board and existing school committee members. So it's sort of the same concept here. Whether when there is a vacancy on the school committee, whether that vacancy should be filled just by a majority of the select board members or majority of the select board together with the remaining committee members from the town involved. So that's question number one to be decided here. And question number two to be decided here is whether that appointment is for the balance of the unexpired term, which could be 3.5 years, right? Because each term is 4 years, or whether the appointment should be until the next district-wide election, which would never be more than 2 years. So those are the two decision points we have to make in this subparagraph C. Is everyone cool? Yeah, wait.
Point of order.
Okay, Don.
I'd like us to consider a third issue, which is that since we've set this up so that you can have an even number of members, or as somebody pointed out last time, if a select board is down to only 2 members or 4 members, you could have an even number. That if there's an inability to agree by the committee, that the moderator, the town moderator, then become involved in the process. So that's a third issue I'd like to have considered.
Okay, I would put that in the category of issue number 1, who appoints the school committee member to the vacant spot? Is it select board only? Is it select board and school committee? Is it select board, school committee and moderator if there's a tie? So that's sort of the category of that needs to be decided. That's the decision point we have on who appoints. And then the second question we need to decide is what the length of the appointment is. Is it balance of the unexpired term? Or is it until the next biennial election? So let's take issue number 1 first. Who appoints? I'm going to open the floor for discussion of that issue. Sarah.
I'm just want to clarify. So in most cases, there's only one school committee member per town.
Except, yeah, except in Great Barrington and Sheffield.
So we're just talking about for Great Barrington and Sheffield, whether those school committee members would be a part of it. Because
Yeah,
right.
you're right. Good observation.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. So it's not as complicated as with the existing school districts where most towns have more than one, but you're right. Yep. Kim.
Like Monterey, there's only one school committee member. But I don't think that existing school committee members from a town should be voting on somebody coming in, especially if they say have conflicts. I think it should be left up to the moderator or the selectman. I mean, am I reading that wrong?
No, that's the decision we need to make tonight, but I was just reminding the group that we had the same discussion when we were talking about appointment of school committee members to the appointed transition committee.
Yeah.
And the board voted by a pretty overwhelming majority to include school committee members in that decision. But that doesn't mean we have to do it the same way here. Just reminding people that we did have that discussion.
I think, and that you're saying that was voted for the transition ones, correct?
Correct, correct.
But these are going to be permanent ones for 2 years or 4 years or whatever their term may be. So again, I just don't believe that it should carry through from the transition into keeping school committee members voting to replace fellow school committee members. Just fine, yeah.
Okay, John and then Patrick.
I agree with Kim. I think the vote for a transition team is a one-time thing and then it's done. The vote for replacing school committee members between elections is a permanent thing and is going to be ongoing. And I agree that the school committee members that are on the committee should probably not be involved, even if it's only a perception of a conflict of interest. And I think I agree with Don that it should be the select board and a moderator and a tie.
Okay. Nadine?
I disagree. I think that it should be a combination of the select board and current existing school committee members. And the reason I believe that is the school committee members may very well have a knowledge of someone who would serve well in the role that the Board of Selectmen may have no clue on. And as we discussed this at our last meeting, you know, Sheffield has had this situation where it's a tie between the 3 existing school committee members and the 3 existing select board members. And it took a little bit of discussion and a meeting or 2, but ultimately we came to a vote without needing a moderator to interject. So we were able to work it out. And I just think that while I understand the possible implications of a conflict of interest with the school committee, I think that they're the ones who know who could serve best.
Steve Bannon?
Yeah, you know, Berkshire Hills has been doing it for as long as I can remember by having the remaining members from the town and the select board filling the vacancy, and it's worked fine. It's never been a problem. I'm a little prejudiced. In 1997, I was appointed that way. I think it worked out okay. There is no conflict. We kind of know what it takes to be on the school committee. We have an inside knowledge. There's no conflict there. It's the best way of doing it.
Okay, Bonnie, then Nancy.
I totally support what Steve and Nadine have said. And exactly what has happened in Sheffield. We're able to hear each other's perspective. And as Nadine pointed out, we've done this more than once. I don't think in any of the times it's been perceived as an unfair advantage one way or another. So I think this only really impacts in a way Sheffield and Great Barrington. And I wonder if in the other towns, if they have one person and somebody is resigning, would you even want to consider that resigning school committee member's perspective? But I definitely think it should be a combination of the school committee and the select board. And it's worked.
Hey, Nancy.
I might be a little confused, but Terry, you may have to correct me here. But I think that the school committee, I got chosen, or I got informed by a school committee member that there was an opening, but I didn't feel like it was coming from the school committee. I think that the decision really was made by the select board, not by the school committee. And I think that you gotta be really careful about that. Am I right, Tara?
Whoever asked you to be on it, if they were a school committee member, you know, and you ran, you were appointed by the select board.
Right. Yeah, just so I guess I'm a little uncomfortable with the concept of it being of the choice being made by the school committee of who comes on to replace them, because it's not just, you know, Sheffield. Well, I guess it would be just Sheffield, Great Barrington for a regional district. But anyway, like I said, I may be misunderstanding this.
Yeah, the proposal here is not that the school committee representatives would be the sole decision makers. The question is whether they would be included together with the select board in that decision. So for example, in New Marlborough, it would be the select board only, because the single representative from New Marlborough would have left the vacancy. But in Great Barrington, for example, if one of the three resigned, then the decision makers would be the 3 select board members and 5 select board members and the 2 remaining school committee members. So there would be a decision-making body of 7 as opposed to 5. That's what we're discussing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Russell?
Yes, so I just wanted to give you 2 pieces of information, which you may already know, but, or some of you, in a town school department, it's by law, it's the remaining school committee members and the board of selectmen. That doesn't mean you have to follow that, but I just wanted to give you that piece of information that it's actually required in a town school system. The other piece of information is the moderators. I don't know if they're elected or appointed, but you need elected officials to be making this decision.
The moderators are elected, I believe, in all the towns, certainly in our town. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. Don and then John.
Okay, given the comment about the law, what's allowed in other towns, and given the fact that it seems like the folks from Sheffield and Great Barrington like the system, plus the fact that it has no effect on the small towns at all, I think that for the good of all, we ought to let them go that way. But I again would add it, provided that if there is an inability to agree, that the moderator become involved and have a vote.
Okay, so is that a motion, Don?
Yes, that's a motion.
I'll second that.
Was that George?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so any more discussion on this? John, do you want to discuss more?
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. I think just I wanted to say to Nadine that the select board appointed us, 24 people. I think we're doing a pretty good job. So I'm actually not sure you need the school committee. I also agree with Don that this only pertains to the two bigger towns, and they really do seem to want it. So I'm not gonna keep them from their dreams. So those are my comments.
Okay, we all need to pursue our dreams. All right, I'm not seeing any more hands, Russell, unless your hand is still up. No, okay, so I'm gonna ask for a vote on Don's motion. Everyone understand what the motion is?
Would you restate it?
No, I'm gonna have Don restate it.
Thank you.
I've learned my lesson, Bonnie.
I move that vacancies be filled by a vote of the select board and the remaining committee members. And that in case of an inability to agree, that the town moderator have a vote.
Well done.
And that would also apply, by the way, if like in Monterey, we went for about 7 or 8 months with only 2 selectmen. So if they couldn't agree on a replacement, you wouldn't have a replacement. Now the moderator would be able to fill that job.
Okay, all in favor of the motion? Charlie?
Lucy, can I?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Can
Yeah.
Don add to his motion when he said the school committee members, could he add school committee members of that town? Because otherwise, if
Yeah.
you say school committee members, it could be the whole school committee.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes, of course. I
that's-
meant that.
Yeah, that's,
Yes.
yeah. Good point, Tara. That's the way it reads in the draft agreement. Okay, so with that clarification, Charlie, you in favor?
Yes, I am.
Carl,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Kim. Kim? Kim?
Yes. Did you hear me?
Tara-
Yes.
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Tara,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bonnie,
Yes.
Nadine,
Yes.
Colin,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, good. So we got that one voted. And the second part of this is, are the new school committee members going to be appointed for the balance of the unexpired term, which could be 1, 2, 3, or 3 years and 11 months, right? The balance of the unexpired term, or until the next district-wide election, which would be no more than 2 years away. So Steve Bannon.
I think it's just simpler to make it the balance of the unexpired term, to force people to run every 2 years for a while, and it just becomes tedious, and we don't have a line of people now, so why make it harder for them?
Okay. And it does avoid screwing up our staggering, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what happened in Southern Berkshire, is that everybody resigned. And then everyone was up for reelection at the next biennial election. because the way it works in Southern Berkshire is you get appointed until the next district-wide election. So doing it for the balance of the unexpired term does avoid that problem if you see it as a problem. Nadine and then Bonnie.
I agree totally with Steve Bannon.
Everyone always does.
Only I
Bonnie?
wish that.
Lucy, I totally agree with the way you stated it. On target.
Okay.
Steve's
mo-
fantasy.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Any more discussion on that? Okay, so I'm gonna take a vote. Oh, wait, have we had a motion? No.
No.
Somebody needs to make a motion that the appointment would be for the balance of the unexpired term.
So moved.
moved.
Oh. Well, I'll
Second.
second it.
Okay, either Steve or Nadine made the motion and Carl Stewart seconded it. So I'm gonna have Steve make it because then everyone will vote in favor. Okay. All in favor, Chuck,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Deb,
Yes.
Peter, Taylor, Peter Taylor,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Tara,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Bonnie,
Yes.
Nadine,
Yes.
Colin,
Yes.
Patrick,
Yes.
Michael,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Did I miss anyone? Okay.
Steve, you
All
really
right.
should have voted no, just to prove us all wrong.
Okay, so now we get to the hard one. And I think, Jake, you've got a slide on this. Votes that we may decide should require a supermajority vote. So vote on the budget by statute needs to be 2/3. So that's not a decision point for us. The question is, do we want to make other votes on other topics be supermajority, or are we satisfied with just having a majority vote at the school committee level on these other topics? So that's the question. We're going to start with probably the hardest of the examples we've got here on the screen. Vote to close the school. That could be by majority vote. That could be by supermajority vote of school committee. And there are a couple of different options outlined in the agreement, which we'll get to. A vote to recommend to the member towns an amendment to the regional school district agreement. Right, any amendment to the agreement is going to have to go out to the towns, but the question here is the vote to recommend to the member towns an amendment to the agreement, does that have to be by a supermajority of the school committee, or can a simple majority make that recommendation? A vote to incur debt and a vote to reconfigure grades among the buildings. So let's start with vote to close the school. Do we have another slide on that, Jake, or?
Yeah,
should we just-
it doesn't have a lot of information on it because there's a lot of language in the regional agreement itself around school closures, and in the agreement, there are two options that are provided to the committee that just are really drawing from language that is in existing agreements. But within each of those options, there are decision points around whether you want a majority vote or a supermajority vote. So there's kind of two questions here. One is, do you want those two options to include majority and supermajority? And then which option based on the language we provided, or an alternative option would the committee prefer?
Yeah,
I don't
so
wanna be-
I just like to walk the group through the two options, and they're at 4E of the agreement. If you've got the agreement in front of you. So option number 1 is basically the way it works at Southern Berkshire. This language is almost identical to the language in the regional agreement for Southern Berkshire. And that's option 1. So no action can be taken on any proposal to open a new school or close an existing school, except upon the affirmative vote. In Southern Berkshire, I believe it's a 2/3 requirement. I have to check that. At least 45 days prior to any, but that's the question for us. Are we going to make it majority or 2/3? Or some other percentage? Southern Berkshire, it's 7 members. I've got my notes here. In Southern Berkshire, you need 7 votes in favor. So it's 7/10 actually, in order to open a new school or close a school. At least 45 days prior to the vote, the committee is required to provide notice to all member town select boards, stating the nature of the proposed action and the times of public hearings. There's a requirement for 2 public hearings on any such action, each to be held at least 7 days apart, and both to be held at least 14 days before the vote of the school committee on the proposed action. At least one of those public hearings has to be held in the member town in which the subject school would be either closed or located. Additional public hearings can be scheduled and held at the discretion of the committee. If a select board makes a request that the committee meet with the board, the committee is required to meet with the board prior to the committee's vote on the proposed action. And the vote is not effective unless the vote is ratified by majority vote of town meetings in at least 4 of the 5 towns. That's the way it works in Southern Berkshire. So here, we could say 3/4, which would be 6 of the 8 towns. That's probably the closest to what Southern Berkshire currently has. 6 out of 8 as opposed to 4 out of 5. So that's option number 1. So that requires, a supermajority vote at the school committee level, 7 members out of 10, or in our case, it would probably be 8 members, 2/3, 8 members out of 11. And a supermajority ratification of the vote in the member towns. So 2 sets of votes, school committee vote and then the town votes. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, which Russell, you probably can, are you still with us?
I am.
Okay. This doesn't come out of Berkshire Hills. Option number 2, I think, was put together for us initially by Mars as sort of a standard approach. Is that your memory of where this language came from?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, I
Where-
looked at the Berkshire Hills agreement, and I don't remember seeing anything in the Berkshire Hills agreement about this. Peter, do you agree that it's not specifically addressed in your agreement?
My recollection is it got taken out because it already happened.
Oh, okay.
It's similar to Southwick Town and Granville, and Mars did create that one, so
Yeah.
it would make sense that maybe Mars gave it to, but
Yeah, it came from Mars. It was one of the recommended approaches by Mars, and it's very different. It's got a different process, so let's just walk through it. It's interesting. No school within the district shall be closed without the district's central office administrators doing a bunch of things. A feasibility study conducted at least 10 months in advance of the proposed closing. Under extraordinary circumstances, this timeline may be modified by a majority vote of the committee with representatives from at least some number of towns voting to support the modified timeline, a complete fiscal analysis to determine the cost savings, the impact on the regional budget, and the individual assessments to the member towns, a review of educational organizational schemes and their financial impact, a review of population trends to determine the long-term impact of the closing, a meeting that includes the select board for the member town affected by the school being studied for closing, and a public hearing. Remember, Southern Berkshire had 2, a public hearing held prior to the vote of the committee. A vote by the committee to begin the study must be taken at least 10 months prior to its vote to close the school. So there's a requirement that there be this significant period of study before there's a vote, and must pass, the vote to begin the study must pass with a 2/3 majority. That's what's suggested here. School may then be closed by the first June 30th after the committee vote. The committee vote to close the school shall require a 2/3 majority vote, so that would be 8 for us, with representatives from at least, could be 5 or 6 towns voting to support the closure. The vote will be held at regularly scheduled committee meeting. And so closing a school means no longer assigning district students to the particular school, and the member town affected by the committee vote assumes control and ownership of the facility unless the school is owned by the district. So in our case, the only 2 schools that would go back to a member town here would be in Egremont and New Marlboro, because all the other buildings, as I understand it, are owned by the district. But what's really important about this option 2, as compared to option 1, is option 2 does not require ratification by the member towns. It just requires a school committee vote after this process has been gone through, a supermajority with representatives from at least some number of towns, probably 6 in our case, voting to support the closure. So those are the 2 options that we put out here. There can be tweaks to either approach, but I just wanted to make sure everyone understood the 2 options under consideration. Okay, Don, lead us off.
Okay. I'd like to propose, I don't mean in the form of motion at the moment, but the advantage of the option 2 is that it provides a process which will undercut arguments that the decision being made is political, because you actually have to have facts about which people can argue in making the decision. The other option 1 is very broad and really doesn't give any standards for making a closure. The only thing that I would do, however, I think I would add to option 2 the final sentence of option 1, so that there is a requirement that the towns, 3/4 of the towns, approve it. So that if I can make an form of a motion and obviously it can be amended and so on, I'd move that we do option number 2 with the addition of the last sentence from option number 1 so that the final decision on closure has to be approved by 3/4 of the member towns. Now, you can treat that either as a motion or just my comment.
Okay. And the only problem with the motion is you need to fill in the blanks in option 2, right? So 1A, right? Under extraordinary circumstances, this timeline may be modified by a majority vote of the committee with representatives from at least X towns voting to support the modified timeline. So what number do you want to put in there? 6?
Fine.
And then down at 4, probably you want the same number 6 there?
In the middle of the Zoom meeting.
That would be fine.
Go back in a bit, okay?
Okay. And then you want to add that the vote would need to be ratified by a majority vote of town meetings in at least 6 of the 8 towns, right?
The sentence from 1 is no vote of the committee to open any new school or close any existing school should be effective unless such vote is ratified by a majority vote of the town meetings in at least 3/4 of the towns.
Yeah, I just don't know what that, I don't know if that's, so 3/4.
3/4 of them.
That'd
I mean,
be, yeah, that'd be 6. That'd be 6 within 8 towns.
Okay.
I just think it's clear. So it'd be 6, okay.
Okay.
Town ratification by at least 6 towns. All right, so we've got the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that for the purposes of discussion.
Okay. All right, so discussion opened. George.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The motion, the first part of the motion says that a supermajority of the school committee must vote to close a school. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, I would like to amend that motion to say that a majority, no, a unanimous vote by the school committee would vote to close the school. And there might be some things in the rest of that motion that would have to be changed to reflect that. But I'm sure you can figure that out.
So are you making a motion to amend Don's motion?
Yes, I am.
Okay. And the amendment would be that there would need to be a unanimous vote of the school committee before the vote could proceed.
No, a unanimous vote of the school committee
Yeah.
to close the school.
No, I get that. Before the vote could proceed to town ratification, but town ratification would still only need to be 6 out of the 8 towns? Or would there need to be unanimity at the town level as well?
No, just
Just the school committee?
the 6 of the 8 would be fine.
Okay. So unanimity at school committee level and everything else would be, the town ratification would be 6 out of 8.
Yes,
Okay.
the reason I suggested that is that 2 of the towns, you know, Great Barrington and Sheffield, are not losing 50% of their votes on the school committee. All the other towns are. And so that's what motivates my amendment.
Peter, thank you, George. Wait, do I have a second to the amendment? No second? Okay. Peter Dillon.
Yeah, I had two clarifying questions. The language around 6 of the 8 towns of the school committee, it's very clear what happens in the towns with 1 vote. But if, and correct me if my numbers are wrong, I'm sort of tired. But if Great Barrington has 3 votes on the school committee, do 2 of the 3 votes have to support it? And then what happens in Sheffield with, I believe, 2 votes on it in that context? So that's my first question. My second one is, if this is a 2-stage process and the towns are ratifying it at 75%, could there be a lower bar at the school committee level because the towns have a 75% vote across towns is a very high threshold, and we trust the voters to move forward. So my first question is about what do we do with the towns that have the more than 1 vote, and then the second one is about the balance between the 2.
Yeah, so the way I'm tired too. The way paragraph 4 reads is the school committee vote would have to be 2/3, plus you would need a representative from 6 of the 8 towns voting in favor. You don't have to have a majority in each town, but you have to have 6 town school committee residents voting in favor. Do you understand that? So you don't need, so it's possible, for example, that just 1 representative from Great Barrington could vote in favor, right? One
makes sense.
representative from Sheffield could vote in favor. And if everybody else voted in favor, you'd satisfy this requirement. So you don't have to have a majority from each of the 6. You just need at least 1 from each of the 6.
That's good.
Okay.
Now, the second one I leave just to the group to decide. If there are 2 steps for it to go through, do both steps need to have a very high bar, or could 1 step have a high bar and 1 have a lower bar?
Yeah. And this proposal, which came out of, Mars and this other school district, had the high bar without the additional ratification of the towns. And so to your point, Peter, if you're adding ratification of the towns, do you really need the supermajority at the school committee level? Open question. Okay, Bonnie, Tom, and then Susan.
Hey, thank you. Having read this and during the week when we first got it, I think there are aspects of both alternatives that are really would help us make a better regional agreement. And given how many people have announced how tired they are, and it's 6:45 at this point, I wonder if this should go to our operations subcommittee to massage it into an integrated option. In other words, a third option that integrates the 2 of them. Having lived through both on the school committee and not, the issues related to the closing of schools and reading back to the old days when Berkshire Hills went through closing schools years and years ago. This is a critical item, and I don't think we have examined all of the issues. So my preference would be to see this not be decided on tonight, and for us to perhaps refer it to operations, Lucy, if that's the correct committee, subcommittee, that could massage it into a third option.
Okay. Tom Burkle.
Yeah, I just want to get something clear in my own head. Option 2, item 5, it defines what the closure of a school is with no longer assigning district students. Are we good in terms of that jiving with section 3B? Where the superintendent shall assign students to the schools, taking into account but not bound by recommendations of the committee, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Are those two okay, or is there any marginal conflict there?
I don't see the conflict, Tom, but maybe.
Well,
you're
let's
seeing
say
something I'm not.
let's say superintendent is appointed and decides, I'm not going to assign any students to New Marlborough Central School. So the students are assigned to Du Bois or Muddy Brook, whatever. How does that affect if we go to option 2?
I see what you're saying. So
I
what you're,
just want to make sure that they jibe, that's all.
yeah. And yeah, I think 3B is intended to address a different issue. Jake, maybe you can speak to that, but maybe we need some qualifying language in 3B to make sure that a superintendent can't de facto, I think this is what Tom is saying, that a superintendent cannot de facto close a school without going through this process in for wherever we are, for B or 4E. So Jake, what does 3B, what is your thinking about what 3B is really intending to address?
I think Tom raises an interesting point, and I would suggest that we haven't dealt with this section yet. I would suggest we take that into consideration, and obviously we're going to come back to this section as a committee, and obviously deal with B, but also the intra-district choice. I see the point he's making, and I would say, I guess I just would say, well, we should revisit it when we get back to this section, because I do think it needs clarification.
Yeah, I don't think 3B is intended to be an end run around the procedures for closing a school, but I understand that it could be read that way, and so we would need to clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of a superintendent redistricting students, which is what I would say this is kind of implying, could be the end of his or her career or contract with that particular district without school committee engagement. Just to make that point.
I don't know about that. Have you been watching national politics lately?
Fair enough.
I agree with John.
So then I'd say we can clearly spell it out and reflect this when we come back to this section. We'll make that clear.
Okay. Good point, Tom. Patrick?
Before I become involved voting on this, I would really very much like to hear from Sheffield and New Marlborough, because their communities are going to be the most sensitive to the question of school closure. And I wouldn't want to see all this effort. I really feel like we should accommodate what those communities feel like this process should be because of the, the heightened sensitivity, if you will, in terms of the implication for the entire agreement that those communities, let's face it, every community has to adopt this, right? I don't want to, I think we need to really kind of listen to what those communities, perspectives are very carefully before we bring this to a decision.
Okay, and I would assume you would include Egremont in that group because they have one of the schools that theoretically would be vulnerable.
Yeah, of course. I'm getting tired. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I get it. Susan.
Hi, Lucy, thank you. I've got to jump off in a couple of minutes, but I lived through the regional school district amendment in Southern Berkshire about when this whole school closure language was adopted. And I will agree with Bonnie. I don't know where it is appropriate to have a more detailed, in-depth discussion about this, but it is going to be a hot button topic. I live in New Marlborough. I'm from New Marlborough. And I know that school is very important to a lot of people. It's the language in that, I don't agree definitely with the language in option 1. I think there's some really good things in option 2. But I do know that the requirement for the 2 public hearings and the one to be held in the town of the school that was to be closed was really paramount in the decision-making that went on there. So I would like to see that included. And I think there was one other point I wanted to make, but I do think this needs a little more time to pull together something that's maybe addresses all the issues. The one question I did want to ask is I don't have the amendment in front of me for Southern Berkshire, but the blank on option A where it says the number of members that have to vote on it. Hold on, I'll pull it up again. I didn't know if you had it.
Yeah, it's 7, Susan. In the
So
Southern Berkshire agreement, it's 7.
7 out of-
Affirmative, 7 out of 10.
7 out of 10. Okay. So I really want to be mirroring very close to what that is with whatever we go forward with. Because again, that figure was critical in getting this amendment passed the first time around. And I don't think a lot of the sentiments has changed with regards to that. I think it's a really big issue.
So if it were 2/3 of the new school committee, that would be 8. 8 out of 11 as opposed to 7 out of 10. So it's pretty analogous.
I get that. And I just would have to spend a little bit more time with it, but those 8 come from which towns, like what's the mirror of, the towns that are involved, being that there's 5 towns in Southern Berkshire right now. I get the math. I just don't know how it correlates actually to the town makeup. So just a little more time on it, but I have to jump off to go to that other meeting at Du Bois. So I apologize, but I think that this is going to be paramount in how people feel about voting on this regional school district agreement.
Okay. So John Silbert, the suggestion was made to bump this over to operations subcommittee. To do a little more study and consideration of the issue. Is that something you would be open to?
Well, I think Bonnie is showing a great deal of confidence in me, and I thank her for that. However, this is not really an operational matter. And Jake already has the lion's share of the information. I think what we do need is a more detailed, mapped out presentation where all of these options are available and transparent for us to consider. My committee, my subcommittee would really be starting from scratch.
Lucy?
Yeah.
I really think John has a point, and also this is a matter of legal drafting as well as expertise. I'd like to suggest that we ask you and Jake, with the assistance of counsel, to take the aspects of 1 that provide increased protection to the towns, such as the 2 public hearings and so on, and incorporate those additional protections in the option 2.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion to have Russell, Jake, and I put together a new draft that incorporates the protections in 1 into option 2, and maybe some slides that show how votes could go among the member towns, what Susan was asking about. So you could see what the possible votes would look like within these strictures. Any discussion on that? Bonnie and then Kim.
Thank you. I would ask that at the same time, given the fact we've gone through this in Southern Berkshire a number of times, that maybe the group, the 3 of you could speak either to the issues that have been raised in Egremont and New Marlborough, speaking to our members on the planning board, to see, where certain sensitivities, and as you lay out how this impacts across 8 towns, to get that additional impact, input. So I really, John, I think that's a good idea, having that team instead of operations handle this.
Yes,
For our
although
next meeting.
I certainly had plenty to say about this. I've been in Southern Berkshire for, over 20 years, so I'd be happy to participate.
Mhm.
Colin? Colin, you muted?
Sorry, all the buttons I gotta click, hands and mutes, and I remember the school closing thing, and I was very passionate about it because at the time, both my kids were over at New Marlborough by choice. We chose that, and so I think I'd like to have a little bit more of a presentation. I think that was one of the things that someone said, because I'm unclear on what the couple ideas that people have been tossing around really look like in detail. So,
Okay. Kim?
Excuse me. I'm just going to say that the parents in our district are very, very passionate about those 2 little schools. And I don't know if they would, there has to be, for me, because I went through the Monterey closing of the school in our town. If there's any way to not have the 3 Great Barrington votes count towards, am I misunderstanding it, that it's across the board, or it has to be 6 different towns?
6 different towns. There has to be a representative from 6 different towns voting in favor, in addition to there having to be a 2/3 vote.
Okay, I think that just needs to be stressed, because that way somebody from New Marlborough is not going to feel like the larger district's going to be closing down their little school. It's a very sensitive thing among parents. So that's always my question. I just wanted to clarify.
Thank you, Kim. So is there any objection to tabling this tonight, and we'll pick it up again at our next planning board meeting with that additional information?
Sounds like a plan.
Okay, so hearing no objection, that's what I'm going to do. We're going to table that one for tonight. Jake, what's the next one on the list for a super majority?
Sorry, let me just get off of mute here. It's I think it's amendments to the agreement. Yeah, amendments to the regional agreement. Which is section 2G.
Two G, isn't amendments in section 9?
Yeah.
I think it's 9B. Right?
Oh, it was 2B for the, sorry,
Yeah, it's 9B.
9B.
So again, there are 2 layers of votes here. There's the vote of the school committee to amend the agreement, and then there needs to be ratification by the towns. So the question is a majority vote by the school committee enough? Or do we need a supermajority of the school committee to recommend to the towns that there be an amendment to the agreement? And then once we get to the towns, how many towns have to vote in favor in order for the amendment to pass? All 8, 3/4, 2/3, or simple majority? So there are 2 layers here. Steve Bannon.
I'll just take the first part. Changing a regional agreement is one of the hardest things that districts should have to do. It shouldn't be simple because you don't want to be changing the agreement every year just on a whim or on some political issue. So I say it's got to be a supermajority.
2/3?
2/3, yes.
Okay. John?
I agree with Steve. I wanted to point out that I think in theory, the school committee should put forward constructive amendments to the towns, because otherwise the block to making changes that may be necessary in the future the bar can be high. On the other hand, I wouldn't want to see us overdosing on amendments and it becoming a political football. So while ideally I would like to see a simple majority at the school committee level and then a supermajority at the town level, if it got to the point where the towns were voting every year, that would be a problem.
Okay. Does someone want to put forward a motion on the vote required at the school committee level first, and then we'll get to the town second?
I make a motion that a supermajority of the school committee be required to initiate any change.
Is that a 2/3 vote, Bonnie?
Oh, 2/3.
Okay, and is there
I'll
a second?
that. I'll second that.
Steve seconded. Okay. Any discussion on that? Okay, so I'm gonna call for a vote on that motion. Any amendment to the regional agreement may be proposed by a 2/3 vote of the school committee. So calling of the vote. Charlie?
Yes.
Carl? George?
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Deb?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Kara?
Yes.
Susan?
Gone.
Oh, it's gone.
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Bonnie?
Yes.
Nadine?
Yes.
Colin?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
Michael?
Yes.
Bill?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Okay, so we've got 2/3 vote by the school committee. And then the question is, should registered voters have the right to initiate this by petition? And if so, what's the percentage required of registered voters in any one town to get that petition before the school committee? So two options that are laid out in the agreement are 10%, a single petition bearing the signatures of at least 10% of registered voters in any one town of the district. Or should it be 20%? Or should it be some other number? Russell, is this alternative approach required by statute to allow a citizen petition to initiate this process?
It is.
It's required by statute?
Yep.
Okay, but it's up to us to decide what this percentage is? 10% or 20% of registered voters?
No, I don't think so,
Oh.
actually.
Well, that will shorten the meeting.
Yeah. Let me look it up while you.
Okay.
you might want to Move to the next
Why
one. I
don't
can look-
we take some comments while Russell's looking it up? Peter?
Yeah, my concern is around the percentage. If it's by statute, then it has to be that, but and other people know other towns better than I do, but Great Barrington typically has between 400 and 500 people at a town meeting, and the total registered voters in Great Barrington, and I think is a little over 4,000. So 20% would effectively not have been met in the last, I don't know, 15 years, maybe once we got to 20%. So if it's by statute, then it is. If you have flexibility in it, I'd be very careful about putting a number that's not consistent with even our aspirational goals for voter turnout.
Okay. And just to be clear, this is just about bringing to the school committee a petition. Well, let me see if that's right. A proposal for amendment may be initiated by a single petition. Yeah, that's not right. What I was about to say, so forget it. You're right, Peter. Russell, do you have the answer yet? You're still looking.
I'm still looking.
Okay,
But I'll show it in a minute.
okay. Bill, then Bonnie.
Is the or between the committee vote and the citizen petition? It's not really an or, it's both.
No,
is
it's not an or. That's
Yeah.
wrong.
it? Okay.
Yeah. You're correct. That's why I stopped saying what I was about to say. It's not an or.
Yeah, I actually don't see, it actually is silent, it appears, on this issue.
Silent on the entire issue or silent on the percentage?
It's silent on the percentage. What chapter 71, section 14B, subsection G states is a method by which the agreement may be amended. That's in the procedure to form a regional school district, but there's nothing about this particular issue. So it looks like they must be taking language from let me just see though, there is a taxpayer petition law. Let me see if I can find that.
Okay.
Maybe it's not 71.
Okay. Bonnie and then Steve.
Thank you. I have a real question here because the way this section is written, it seems to completely be changing the focus to the school committee as opposed to the towns. And the way we have always been advised, I'm speaking Southern Berkshire, I can't speak for Berkshire Hills, maybe Steve can enlighten us, is that any change to the regional agreement is a town initiative. Because it's the towns that have entered into the regional agreement. So for example, the last changes we made had to do with assessments. And we, as a school committee, were asked to act on it. And we were advised, no, this has to come from the towns. And New Marlborough initiated the activity. All the 5 towns were involved. We put out the request, but the 5 towns of Southern Berkshire were the ones who engaged in coming up with the new assessment methodology, because they are the ones who are partner to the regional agreement.
Yeah, so Bonnie, in your agreement,
Mhm.
in the Southern Berkshire Regional School District Regional Agreement, there's a requirement that any amendment to the regional agreement must be ratified by all of the towns, all 5 towns. That's in your agreement. So that's why anytime in Southern Berkshire, there's an amendment to the agreement, all 5 towns have to ratify. What we're discussing tonight is whether we want to keep that. There is a town ratification provision in this section, the last paragraph. So first you have a school committee vote, and then it goes out to the towns. Then the question is, when it goes out to the towns, do you need all 8 towns to vote in favor? Or can you have an amendment approved with a 3/4 of the town's vote or 2/3 of the town's vote? That's a decision point for us.
Okay, that's not where my question is. The way I read the whole section, it seems to be shifting more authority over to the school committee. And my question goes to the basic idea of when you enter into a regional agreement, it's the towns that have done it. So therefore, some of the language seems to be and I obviously can be wrong, seems to me that there is language that is shifting authority to the school committee that really resides with the towns. So I'm not
No,
talking.
under
numbers
your
or anything
agreement, Bonnie, an amendment may be initiated by a majority vote of the members of the school committee. It then has to go to the towns. It can be initiated by a majority vote of the school committee, but then it needs to go to the towns, and all 5 towns have to vote in favor under your agreement.
I'm speaking to the new agreement. I just.
Right,
want
and the
to
new
be sure-
agreement provides, we just voted that you need a 2/3 majority of the school committee to initiate the amendment. We're still working on this petition issue. And then under the draft, it goes to the towns, just like it does in Southern Berkshire. And the question is, are we going to provide in the new agreement that all 8 towns have to vote in favor in order for the amendment to be adopted? Or are we going to agree that 3/4 of the towns will carry the day, or 2/3 of the towns will carry the day? That's what we're discussing. So I don't,
understand all of
yeah,
that.
I don't think it's a shift.
Okay, I understand all of that.
Okay. All right, Russ, Steve?
Yeah, I'm a little confused, and it's just my memory and lateness of the hour. I know in Berkshire Hills, the last time we changed the regional agreement, we formed a regional agreement committee, which had representatives from all 3 towns, finance committee members, select board members. It was like 17 people on it.
That's
And
what
then
we
they
did.
made a recommendation back to the school committee. So I don't know if that's in our agreement, Lucy, or we just made that up as we went along, but it worked out really well. But that was not that many years ago. Well, maybe it was, but Peter may have a better memory than I do about this.
No, you're accurate on what you're describing. I want to go back and look at that. That was a
So
very,
I've got your agreement here. So under your agreement, A proposal for amendment may be initiated by a single petition bearing the signatures of at least 10%, to your point, Peter, of registered voters in any one town of the district, or by a majority of the members of the committee. So it can happen either way under your agreement. And then any proposal for amendment shall be presented to the select boards of each member towns, include in the warrant, and shall take effect upon its acceptance by a majority of voters present in each of the member towns. So your agreement, like the Southern Berkshire agreement, requires unanimity of all the a majority of all 3 towns voting in favor of an amendment. And so, yeah, you may have put together a special group to consider it. That's probably was a really good idea, but it's not, I'm not seeing it in your agreement.
I couldn't remember if it was in the agreement or we were just smarter than we thought.
Yeah. And, you know, there's nothing in the agreement that prohibits you from putting that group together. So Russell, do you have an answer to our question?
Yeah, so I looked at the DESI checklist and the law itself. I don't see any requirement for this provision at all.
For the petition?
Yeah,
Okay.
so we could double check that with DESI, but I don't see anything that requires it. It is very common because I know it's in most regional agreements.
Okay.
I think-
So it's, go ahead.
Isn't that why it's an or? I mean, either we're choosing the first option, which is 2/3 of the committee, or we're choosing a second option, which has 2 pieces in it. A majority of the committee and a citizen's petition. And either one of those 2 pieces then results in the amendment moving to the town. The way I'm interpreting this language.
I see, yeah. Okay, so it's 7:17. I'm gonna take the additional comments with hands up, but I do think we're all getting tired. We should have some time for public comments. And we'll take this back up with some additional guidance from council at our next meeting. So Don, George, and then Bill.
I'll be brief. This agreement, if I read it correctly, this draft provides that for this agreement to go into effect, all 8 towns have to vote in favor. If I'm reading that correctly, then it would be inconsistent with that agreement to allow changes to the agreement by anything less than full agreement.
What are you looking at? Because
I'm looking at section 15, effective date and jurisdiction. It says the agreement takes effect when, and it lists all the towns have voted in favor of the agreement. So
section
if it's
15 of what, Don?
page 18, the draft agreement. Page 18, section XV, effective date and jurisdiction.
Well, that's a different, so you're saying that section is inconsistent with section 9?
What I'm saying is, if the agreement requires unanimity.
For the
Unlike
initial
our-
acceptance.
Well, that's the agreement. If the agreement requires unanimity, unlike our United States Constitution, then any amendment to it should require unanimity. If you can change it with less than unanimity, then it seems to me section 15 should be amended to say that if 3/4 of the towns approve it, or 2/3, whichever, then it's effective.
Yeah, I don't, yeah, I don't think that works for entering into the agreement initially. And, you know, we can decide that we want unanimity for amendment. That's one of the options laid out on page 13.
7:30.
Somebody's,
Right now.
somebody needs to be muted. One of the options on page 13 is that we need unanimity. There are other options. We may not need to consider those because we may all agree that we should have unanimity for any amendment, just as we're going to have unanimity for entering into this agreement in the first place. All right, George, and then Steve, did you, or no, Bill, you had your hand up. But George first.
Very briefly, we have posted a end time of 7:30, and we now have 9 minutes left. And so I really endorse your willingness to accept public comment.
Okay, Bill, did you have another comment?
No,
before we-
I pulled my hand down.
Okay. Not seeing any more hands, so we'll go to public comments. Christine, you're still with us, right? So you can
I'm-
bring it. Okay.
Absolutely. Yep.
All right, great. Thanks for hanging in.
course.
Sharon Gregory's hand is up, so can you bring her over?
Yep, she's on her way. Sharon, go ahead. Sharon. Sharon, you're muted. I don't know if something's not working on her end.
Yeah, Sharon will give you another.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're there.
Okay, I can barely hear you, but all I want to say is that, you know, when the United States was formed, I think that we had to have unanimity, but we don't have to have unanimity with every change. So I think that would really hamstring the, you know, the lively process of refining what this district is to be. So I would like the committee to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Any other public comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. I see a hand
hand-
among a panelist. Don, your hand is up.
Yeah, I want to withdraw my analogy. I made a mistake because the US Constitution was if a certain number of states percentage agreed, then they'd form the nation, but the other states would not be part of it. So my analogy was not good.
Right.
But I do think that there should be the same rule for amendment that there is for creation. But then I think you said early on that if, for example, 7 out of 8 of the towns voted in favor of this, we would be able to go forward with it. Recollection, right?
Well, we would theoretically be able to go forward with a 7-town regional agreement, right? So you can't force a town who votes against to join our region, but if 7 of the 8 towns voted in favor, we might consider to revise this agreement to make it a 7-town new district, and then that 8th town would figure out a way to educate its kids through tuition agreements or other approaches. So that's what I said. And that's true. But we can't force a town to join this new district if we don't get a majority vote in that town in favor of the new agreement. Oh, Jill's got her hand up. So can you bring Jill over?
Yes.
I did not realize that I was listed as Jill Graham. This is Julie Hannah from Sheffield.
Oh, hi, Julie.
With my church role, and I share an account, so I will in the future make sure I get in there on my personal Zoom. Anyway, my question is for the project manager on the agenda, if there was anything important as finance committee member from Sheffield about the timing of recommendation in town meetings, because I know there was conversation that this may not be ready for May town meeting. So I'm just wondering if Jake has anything on that, since it looks like we weren't going to get to that on the agenda.
Oh, thank you, Julie. Thank you for raising that. Yes. Jake, why don't you give an update on that?
Well, we discussed this, I believe, at the last meeting. And I think the decision was that the timetable, the way it's rolling out now, is not favorable to likely having this ready for the spring town meetings. And we've also heard pretty consistently that it would be a bit much to add to a town meeting, as given the importance and attention that's required for this particular decision at town level. So I believe at the last meeting, we discussed the likelihood that we'd be looking at late summer, early fall. And then I believe we heard some feedback that we should clearly avoid any summer months because of travel. And so I think right now the idea is that we'd be looking at, September, early October. Anything additional you want to add, Lucy?
No, I think that's good. Julie, you have a follow-up?
I just had a follow-up because I remember that when we had that conversation, you were going to be checking, and Peter Dillon, I don't know if you were able to figure that out. Would it still work with what you're doing with MSBA, the timetable that was being proposed? Would that still work?
I think so, but I'm waiting for multiple responses from the MSBA on enrollment and some other things. So I can't definitively say that, but I think so.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any additional public comments? I don't see any. Kim and then Peter.
I just want to go back to something Don Colburn said when you were saying about if one town disagrees and 7 towns agree. What is that? It's not as simple because you have the towns that have to agree to break the current agreement, correct? That they are in currently in order to join the new 8 town. So it's not like they can just go off and do it. They have to get out of their commitment that they have. Am I correct?
I'm not gonna opine on that. I can't
Well,
imagine.
I'm just saying, I mean,
can't imagine one
that's what
town-
happened out at Minuteman, and I was reading up on it. So I know that they have to get out of their current agreement before they can join something else.
Well, you'd have to parse through the agreement provisions about withdrawal. And, you'd have to.
My point is, it's not as
talk
simple as saying, oh, I want to do this one now. It's not that simple.
Yeah, I don't think that's the topic
I'm just-
for conversation this evening. I think what I said is accurate. But you know, people can have different points of view, I guess, on that. Peter?
No, my question was similar to the last, just that my understanding, and it's not based on any close read of anything, is that I was once given the impression that you had to break the existing agreement before you could vote on a new agreement.
I don't know what break the existing agreement means.
Means
Again,
to dissolve
it's-
it.
yeah, it's, you know, this is something we can ask council to opine on if we get to that point. I really would encourage people to focus on trying to get something before the 8 towns that all can agree to. And if we have one town, one of the smaller towns who says no, you know, then we can really dig into this issue. But frankly, from my perspective, it's not a conversation which would be sort of moving forward towards an 8-town vote. It's not moving in that direction. It's moving in a different direction. And why get into it if we're not there yet? That's my offer on it. But we're at 7:30. This was not, you know, an agenda topic. And so I prefer if we reserve it for another time when we're all fresher and have the benefit of council's analysis. If you want to discuss it, I think we should be discussing the terms of the regional agreement and see if we can get through that. George?
Thank you, Lucy. I would just like to know what you think. You mentioned one town that might vote no. 2 towns voted no.
Yeah, these are all theoretical possibilities.
No, I'm asking what the result would be. Under,
I don't know, George, what the result would be. These are all theoretical possibilities.
no,
I mean,
I think it's in.
Are you asking me for a legal opinion? Because I'm not going to give it.
No, actually, I'm signing off. Thank you.
Okay. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Any objection? Hearing none, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all. We're meeting again in a
Thank you,
couple of
Lucy.
weeks.